The most out of ordinary thing I can say I do is, based on an invitation, I walked into a classroom of curious, bright-eyed children ages from 9 to 11, and instead of giving them a technical talk on geothermal energy, I told them a story. I introduced them to Hydra. Hydra is a character I created just for them, a playful twist on one of their heroes' avatar, Aang, the last airbender. But Hydra, she's a hot water bender, a hydrogeologist with the power to harness the Earth's heat. And as I watched their eyes light up with wonder, I realized this is the most fulfilling kind of knowledge sharing. Because in that moment, they weren't just learning science, they were imagining themselves as heroes of the planet. They were seeing geothermal not as a subject, but as a superpower, which I believe it is a superpower. And that to me, 100% satisfying, 100% motivating, because the future belongs to those who believe they can bend the elements not with fantasy, but with science, curiosity, and courage. And final words, of course, there's a reason that Hydra is a woman, because I wanted every girl in that classroom to see that she could be the hero, that she could harness the power of the earth, make bold discoveries, and lead the way toward a more sustainable world. Presentation matters, confidence matters, and sometimes all it takes is one character, one moment to plant the seed that says, yes, I belong here.
Welcome to Geothermal Unleashed, where we will explore the cutting edge of geothermal energy. I'm Elizabeth Cambre from the Vallourec New Energies team, and I'm here to help educate and document geothermal's rise in the global energy transition. Today, I'm delighted to welcome my guest that is dialing in from Turkey, Cannur Bozkurt, the VP of Business Development at Ignis H2 Energy. Welcome to the show. Why don't we start by letting you introduce yourself, and can you tell us about your educational and professional background and what led you to pursue a career in the geothermal industry?
Thank you, Elizabeth. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here for me. I'm pretty sure that we will have fun today. Well, when people ask me how I ended up in geothermal industry, I usually say I followed the heat. But let me take you a few steps back. I am Cannur Bozkurt, a hydrogeology engineer. I think an explorer by spirit and someone who has spent her career moving from the depths of the oceans to the heart of the crust. I began my journey in the oil and gas industry, fresh out from the university with a degree in geological and hydrogeological engineering. Those early years took me both onshore and offshore rigs, where I worked as well site geologist and petrophysicist. It was exhilarating, intense, and humbling being part of a sector that quite literally fuels the world. I also deepened my technical foundation through the Geoscience Graduate Diploma program at Institute of French of Petroleum in France. After more than a decade in downstream oil and gas, something shifted. I began to ask myself, what kind of world do I want to help build? That question led me to renewable energy, and in 2011, I made the leap, joining Transmart Turkey and stepping into geothermal energy. Geothermal was love at first sight. It combined everything I valued: earth science, energy, sustainability, and a deep respect for the natural systems that we live within. So after Transmart in 2017, I joined the Geothermal Power Plant Investors Association in Turkey, where I worked to implement international standards and encourage collaboration in our sector. The next year, I founded my own company, Harmony Geothermal, supporting clients across the globe like World Bank, EBRD, with technical reporting, project development, and consulting international investors. Since then, I've had the privilege to serve in many capacities, from managing the Geothermal Center of Excellence at TAKA to directing Energy Change Turkey, and now leading project development efforts across Turkey at Ignis Energy. But I think my passion doesn't stop at the project site. I've also worked to connect our community, editing the first national geothermal magazine, and leaded Geothermal Haberler, the Turkish arm of the global geothermal news network Think Energy, and was the Turkey ambassador of International Geothermal Association. What I do today is I serve as a board member of the Geothermal Energy Association of Turkey and as an ambassador for the Geothermal Energy Advancement Association. And finally, why geothermal? Because it's not just about energy, it's about resilience, it's about independence, sustainability, responsibility. And I believe now more than ever, we need people who are willing to follow the heat. And not just scientists or engineers, we need dreamers, storytellers, and the next generation of problem solvers. I think that's why I did something a little unconventional, leaving oil gas and moving into geothermal. But I think
love that. I love it.
The most out of ordinary thing I can say I do is, based on an invitation, I walked into a classroom of curious, bright-eyed children ages from 9 to 11. And instead of giving them a technical talk on geothermal energy, I told them a story. I introduced them to Hydra. Hydra is a character I created just for them, a playful twist on one of their heroes, Avatar Aang, the last airbender. But Hydra, she's a hot water bender, a hydrogeologist with the power to harness the Earth's heat. And as I watched, their eyes light up with wonder, I realized this is the most fulfilling kind of knowledge sharing. Because in that moment, they weren't just learning science, they were imagining themselves as heroes of the planet. They were seeing geothermal not as a subject, but as a superpower, which I believe it is a superpower. That to me, 100% satisfying, 100% motivating, because the future belongs to those who believe they can bend the elements not with fantasy, but with science, curiosity, and courage. And final words, of course, there's a reason that Hydra is a woman, because I wanted every girl in that classroom to see that she could be the hero, that she could harness the power of the earth, make bold discoveries, and lead the way toward a more sustainable world. Presentation matters, confidence matters, and sometimes all it takes is one character, one moment to plant the seed that says, yes, I belong here.
Whoa, I'm blown away. I think that is so creative. I love that.
Thank you.
Yes, I just love the work that you're doing with the girls and your inspiration for folks to follow the heat. That is great. Let's turn now to talk about geothermal in Turkey. Can you provide an overview of what geothermal energy development looks like in Turkey? And then can you explain how the eastern and western regions differ in terms of geothermal potential and activity?
Well, Turkey is a country where I can say, earth breadths a bit less visible than Iceland, maybe. It sits on a complex tectonic puzzle, fault lines that make us both vulnerable and immensely rich in underground heat. This heat, which is the geothermal energy, is one of our most promising tools for a sustainable future. The story of geothermal in Turkey begins in the west. The Aegean region, with its well-known graben systems, is our geothermal heartland. These tectonically active zones allow heat from deep beneath the crust to rise close to the surface. Here, high-temperature reservoirs, ideal for electricity generation, are abundant and relatively accessible. It's where we drilled our first wells, but built our first power plants and proved that Turkey could be a geothermal powerhouse. And today, Turkey ranks among the top 5 countries globally in installed geothermal power capacity, which of course didn't happen overnight. It took vision, which has started since in early 1960s. It took courage, mainly the courage of Turkish investors, invested and developed today's installed capacity. And quite frankly, it took also trial and error, lessons learned handbook, which sets a valuable example for any countries interested in developing their resources. Did you know that the largest geothermal greenhouse in Europe is in Izmir, western part of Turkey? And Germany, Denmark, Russia, Norway, and Spain stand out among the countries as products are sent. The peppers grown there even reach the tables of British royal palace. So to deserve the term powerhouse, we have scientific data now, accompanied by a proven history. Back in 2015, projections estimated that we could generate 600 megawatt of electricity and 31,000 approximately megawatt time of heat. But our story took an exciting turn. With extensive drilling and discoveries, Turkey became the fourth largest geothermal electricity producer worldwide, 1.7 gigawatt installed capacity, the second largest for direct use applications, around 5 gigawatt thermal. And based on the Geothermal Resources Strategy Report shared by our Energy Ministry in 2022, there is the land of even a greater potential. More than 100 gigawatt for direct use applications, which can replace 90 million cubic meters of gas, 9 gigawatt power generation, electricity generation from hydrothermal resources, and 400 gigawatt from enhanced geothermal systems. And all the numbers I mentioned is just for the depths between surface to the 46 kilometers depth. So we only scratch the surface. In other words, this data represents that geothermal potential doesn't end in Western Anatolia. So the second hottest well drilled in mid-Anatolia at depth of 3,800 meters with almost 300 degrees Celsius. So what else do we have? Eastern Anatolia, a game changer, a land where volcanic history, structural geology, and incentives align to create the perfect conditions for geothermal discovery, a region filled with untapped potential that maybe can redefine Turkey's geothermal future. Eastern Anatolia is uniquely positioned for geothermal development because of geothermal manifestations such as permeability, heat, and fluid, all there together weighting us within favorable geological structures. Various investment incentives are existing because the region is an emerging growth zone. So there is strong governmental support to stabilize and grow the regional economy. And because geothermal energy is a kind of one-stop shop, comparing to the western part of the country now, it is possible and it's easier to access public land, receive discounted land lease rates, and long-term lease agreements. So what I see in Eastern Anatolia is not only the whole elements of a geothermal system, but also support from local authorities, which is undeniable and indispensable. After all I said, let's answer a question. So why hasn't Eastern Anatolia been developed yet? There has been a politically challenging environment which stands as the first reason, and which is solved in the near past, by the way. Additionally, some would say it's because the terrain is challenging, yes. Others point to infrastructure hurdles, yes. But history teaches us that the greatest breakthrough happens when we stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities. So in the West, we are harvesting what we've already proven, and in the East, as Ignis Energy, we are writing the next chapter of our geothermal story.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so you focus on business development at Ignis. Can you talk a little bit about what business development in geothermal looks like in Turkey? And then what are some of the key drivers and challenges?
I really would like to say it's a pleasure cruise, but it's not. Business development in geothermal energy, in fact, worldwide, is not like flipping a switch. It's more likely planting a seed underground, it takes time, knowledge, risk-taking, and a whole lot of heat, literally and figuratively. In Turkey, geothermal business development has seen a rapid acceleration following the geothermal law came in force by 2007. Thanks to strong government support, particularly through the feed-in tariffs and licensing incentives, we've seen a wave of private sector investment. Local entrepreneurs and a very limited number of international developers joined forces to drill, develop, and deliver megawatts of clean baseload power to our national grid. But what really drives business development in this sector? Well, I can list maybe three key drivers. First is the resource. You need heat. Turkey has it. We are blessed with tectonic dynamics that create high geothermal gradients, but it's not enough to have potential. You need to prove it, which we did by applying exploration, geoscience, drilling, and tolerance of geological uncertainty. The second may be the policy. Clear, stable, and long-term policy frameworks are essential. When feed-in tariffs were introduced, it was like striking a match. But when they were reduced or become uncertain, which we faced in the past, the match flickered. Business development in geothermal is slow burn. It doesn't respond well to short-term thinking. Investors need predictability, developers need permits, and communities need trust. And the last one, of course, the people. Geothermal is not a, how can I say, it's not a plug-and-play business. It requires multidisciplinary expertise from geologists, reservoir engineers to environmental planners and financiers to policymakers. And Turkey has built this talent pool over time. Today, our sector is more skilled, more agile, and more collaborative than ever before. But of course, I mean, there are challenges which are real and matters. The first one can be the exploration risk. You can invest millions and still not hit a viable reservoir. De-risking tools like government-backed drilling insurance or shared exploration data are still developing in Turkey. However, one of our state authorities is working quite well on performing the earlier exploration on various geothermal fields. The second challenge should be the financing. Geothermal sits in a strange spot, too risky for traditional lenders, too slow for short-term investors, and we need more patient capital, more blended finance models, and more public-private partnership that understand the long game. And the final one can be the public perception. Geothermal is clean, but it's not visible. I mean, we drill, we build, and sometimes we make mistakes. That's why transparent communication, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility are no longer optional. Today, they are business critical. So what does geothermal business development in Turkey look like? It's bold, it's evolving, and it's built on a deep belief that the energy of the future doesn't always come from the sun or the wind. Sometimes it rises from within the earth.
Great. Okay, so I don't know too much about the geothermal ecosystem in Turkey. So can you outline that for me and our listeners as well, who may not be familiar as well? So who are the key companies, the geothermal developers, the key stakeholders? What does the infrastructure look like? And then what are the market dynamics like in Turkey?
Well, we have around 75 installed power units. So I can name very active 15 companies working in geothermal market. But an ecosystem of multidisciplinary environments with endless opportunities, having the chance to touch any industry that you can list. So like any ecosystem, it thrives on balance, cooperation, and the continuous flow of energy, human, institutional, and geothermal. At the heart of it all, there are the developers and the investors, that limited number of companies who take on the technical and financial risks to begin geothermal energy from concept to the megawatts. These include both domestic pioneers and international firms who come to Turkey drawn by its rich resource and promising returns. Then we have the regulators and policymakers, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, our energy market regulator, local authorities. So they define the legal framework, issue the licenses, and provide the incentives, or sometimes the roadblocks that shape how this sector grows. Maybe we must not forget, of course, research institutions and universities, which are essential for innovation, exploration techniques, and training the next generation of geothermal experts, and of course the communities, because no geothermal project can be sustainable unless it is accepted and embraced by the people who live near it. So Turkey has built an impressive foundation over the past 2 decades. From high temperature power plants in the west to medium and low temperature facilities for greenhouse heating and district energy, the physical assets are expanding. We also have a growing network of transmission infrastructure through interconnection. There are still some problems in some areas, but already plant developments by government are in place. So the market is also evolving in and showing an interest in hybrid systems or value-added byproducts like lithium extraction or integrated systems of direct and indirect applications together. But today, geothermal is what I see is moving beyond megawatts. Environmental monitoring, reinjection practices, and community engagements are becoming market differentiators. I mean, where we can all of them witness easily in Turkey.
Okay, let's turn now to discuss Ignis Energy. Can you talk about the geothermal project portfolio that Ignis has, and then what is the company's strategic focus within the sector?
Here comes the story of a young company, Ignis H2 Energy. Well, we are not even 4 years old, but we are moving fast. And what sets us apart in the geothermal world is, for me, simple. We don't believe in putting all our steam in one well. While many startups in this space focus on a single technology or location, we take a different approach. We manage a risk-balanced portfolio, diverse, dynamic, and global, targeting high enthalpy regions where the Earth's heat is powerful and ready to be harnessed. Let me take you on a quick tour of our journey. In the United States, we have 4 active projects. 2 of them are in Alaska, at Mount Spur and Mount Augustine, majestic volcanic sites where we are tapping into immense geothermal potential. Another project sits in the basalt fields of Nevada, and the 4th is in California's Clear Lake volcanic field, a region with both heat and history. Across the Atlantic, we are working on something quite special on the island of Vulcano in Italy. Our goal is bold but clear: to power the Aeolian Islands entirely with geothermal energy. Imagine replacing every drop of diesel fuel with clean heat from the earth. Enough energy is not just for electricity, but potentially to run desalination plants, making the island more self-sufficient, sustainable, and resilient. Coming back to my home, Turkey, we hold 5 licenses in Eastern Anatolia, 1 exploitation and 4 exploration. These sites carry names that whisper their geothermal legacy, places where history and heat run deep. But we are not stopping there. We are actively exploring opportunities in Indonesia, one of the most exciting geothermal markets on the planet. And by 2030, we aim to advance a global portfolio of 1 gigawatt of documented producible geothermal reserves. But it's not just about raw megawatts, it's also about integrated systems, smart, connected, and efficient approaches that optimize every drop of heat for power, water, agriculture, and beyond. At Ignis H2 Energy, we believe that geothermal energy is more than just electricity. It's a foundation for circular solutions, for sustainable communities, and for energy independence, of course. So, what else can I say? In this journey, we are together with a world-class advisory board, our sister company, Geolog's expertise, collaborations with leading institutions and worldwide geothermal experts. We have strategic partners like Sage Systems, Saipem, AD Drill Tech, Geolog for sure, CLEAC, Baker Hughes, and Renewable Energy and GeoAlaska. We are still young, but we are thinking big, moving fast, and always digging deep into the earth, into innovation, and into what's possible when we follow the heat.
Okay, let's turn now. I'm very interested to learn how supportive is the Turkish government of geothermal energy, and what does the investment landscape look like for this sector?
Well, if you think Turkey's geothermal story is a recent chapter in our energy journey, surely it's not. We can go back to 1920s. That's the starting point, paying serious attention to the Earth's heat. Over the decades, geothermal resources have never been far from any government's radar. The country's first thermal law was drafted by the General Directorate of Mineral Research and Exploration before 1960s. And when we come to this state, we already had the completed national inventory of thermal waters. Then came 1960 is a landmark year because Turkey drilled its very first geothermal well in Kızıldere field, which is a site that today powers around 400 megawatts of electricity. So, but when things really take off, 2007, the year that the geothermal law came into force, alongside the government's strategy to liberalize the electricity market, the legislation became the ignition point for the private sector, and from that moment on, Turkey's geothermal sector didn't just heat up, accelerated with a worldwide record. Today, the ecosystem for geothermal development is rich with incentives, especially during the development and operational phases, but even at exploration, at the most risky phase and the early stage isn't left behind. Maybe I can share a few examples.
Sure.
For instance, if your project is approved, the land around your facility, even if it's forest, pasture, or state-owned, can be allocated for your use, including access roads and transmission lines. In case of disputes with landowners, the government enables fast-track expropriation to avoid costly delays. For projects on treasury or public land, an 85% discount on the land use fees during the investment period and for the first 10 years of operation is accessible. So that's the beginning for the exploration, but geothermal developers also benefit from grid connection priorities, tax incentives, and a robust feed-in tariff system. Power plants receives around 11.5 USD cents per kilowatt hour for 15 years. And if you build your plant with domestic equipment manufactured in the domestic market, then you receive an additional bonus up to 0.7 USD cents per kilowatt hour for the first 5 years in operation. And this triggered the momentum. But more than that, just very recently on May 13, the president of Turkey delivered a powerful message, a call to international entrepreneurs to invest in countries' underdeveloped regions, including Eastern Anatolia, where geothermal mining and tourism opportunities are waiting to be unlocked. This is more than a policy, it's a bold invitation, a promise of win-win partnerships backed by an upcoming new incentive package designed to reawaken the underground wealth that has gone untapped for the past 40 years. So when, we talk about Turkey's geothermal journey, we are not just talking about steam and turbines, we are talking about a long-standing national vision, almost modern regulatory framework, and a growing commitment to harness the heat beneath our feet for sustainable development, regional growth, and for us, the most critical thing for sure, the energy independence. So this isn't just a resource for us, it's a national opportunity. And the best part, the heat is already there. We just have to tap on it.
That's great. So what does a typical geothermal well and a power generation facility in Turkey look like in terms of design, scale, and technology?
Not much differing from the world, I can say. But first, let's start with the underground. What you need in the end is not a hole drilled into the depths of the earth. You need to design an entire system, an elegant blend of geology, engineering, and innovation when needed. So a typical geothermal well in Turkey look like it starts with a drill pad, usually covering about 1 to 2 hectares. We drill deep 1,500 to 3,500 meters on average, depending on the reservoir temperature and geology. So we often targeting high temperature fields. So these are high enthalpy wells designed to access fluid temperatures ranging between 130 degrees to over 300 degrees Celsius. Each well costs anywhere from 2 to 4 million USD, depending on depth and complexity. We use time to time directional drilling to reach specific targets. And once we find what we are looking for, steam, hot water, or 2 phases mix, we test, we log, and connect it to the facility. So coming to the surface, to the power plant, most geothermal power plants in Turkey today are binary cycle or a very limited flash steam systems. In high temperature fields like Kızıldere, the first explored field of the country, we see a combination of both technologies, both binary and flash steam systems. A flash plant uses the pressure drop to separate steam from hot water, spinning to a turbine to generate electricity, where a binary plant, more common for medium temperature resources, uses a secondary fluid that vaporizes at lower temperatures, which can be named also as a closed-loop system, which is clean and efficient. On average, each power plant has an installed capacity ranging from 20 to 50 megawatts, though some, like Kızıldere or Efeler, can reach and be over on 100 megawatts. And these aren't just clusters of machines, they are also using integrated systems, complete with re-injection wells to preserve the reservoir, advanced monitoring units, and increasingly hybrid solutions combining geothermal with solar and integrating alternatives, mostly the greenhouse and very limited to district heating.
So we have time for one more question, and I like this question. Are geothermal developers in Turkey incorporating artificial intelligence or other advanced technologies in exploration and development?
Well, I cannot say that we are at the frontier in this era. We are beginning to use this machine learning algorithms to enhance reservoir productivity and for predictive maintenance. The challenge being faced with geothermal is its high risk, high cost, high uncertainty game at exploration phase. So we drill deep, sometimes to 3,000 meters or more, and every decision we make along the way costs time and millions of dollars. So this is where AI and advanced technologies should come into the game. So unfortunately, it's evolving. There are companies starting using it. Mostly, it's common to see in the operation phase of the power plants. But what I can comfortably say is that as Ignis Energy, we use AI algorithms to analyze massive geological data sets from gravity to magnetotelluric and seismic surveys to better predict where heat and permeability align. What used to take months of interpretation by a team of geoscientists, AI now can now support in days, learning and improving as it goes. We are also integrating remote sensing and satellite imagery processed by AI to detect the subtle surface temperatures, anomalies, or vegetation stress that might indicate hidden geothermal activity. And here I think a big thanks to our sister company, Geolog. Once we are drilling, we use real-time data analytics to monitor the well. Sensors downhole and on the surface feed live data to platforms to detect any anomalies, predict fluid behavior, the gas and chemical composition, and guide engineers toward more precise, more productive wells.
Wonderful. Well, we're out of time, but I want to just thank you, Cannur, for joining us today, and I want to thank our listeners for joining this episode of Geothermal Unleashed. I hope today's discussion has sparked new insights and deepened your understanding of the geothermal industry's incredible potential. Until next time, let's keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and let's continue working together to unleash the full potential of geothermal. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.